This season, the New York Knicks emerge as one of the favorites to come out of the Eastern Conference and go to the NBA Finals. With their added offensive talent and coaching adjustments, the New York Knicks are set to have a really good regular season. But are they? Last season, the New York Knicks went to the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time in 25 years, but it still feels like the New York Knicks fans and media have a bad taste in their mouth. After losing in 6 games to the Indiana Pacers, they ended up firing head coach Tom Thibodeau. So with the added bench depth and new head coach, are the New York Knicks finally able to get over the hump and win a championship? Let's find out on At the Buzzer Sports. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to a brand new episode of At the Buzzer Sports, where we talk all things basketball all the time. My name is John Drummond, and the New York Knicks are coming off a season where they went 51-31 and emerged as the 5th best offense in the NBA with an offensive rating of 117.3 and a defense of 113.3, which would have put them at 13th best in the regular season. As we all know, right before the regular season started, they traded for Karl-Anthony Towns, who brought a brand new dimension to this offense for that regular season. Last season, Karl-Anthony Towns averaged 24 points per game, 13 rebounds, and 3 assists on a 63% true shooting. And this was the first time that he was playing center for the New York Knicks, opposed to the last 2 seasons playing power forward next to Rudy Gobert. And I think this opened up his offensive game in ways that we have not seen in a while. In Minnesota, Karl-Anthony Towns was used as the spacer, as the shooter, as the floor spacer for other guys in Minnesota to have lanes to drive to the rim. But Karl-Anthony Towns in New York was able to capitalize off the space that he was given with the shooters that were surrounding him, whether it was Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, or even Deuce McBride at times. In Minnesota, we looked at Karl-Anthony Towns as a bad driver, a bad ball handler, somebody that racks up constant charges or turnovers because he could not put the ball on the floor and attack mismatches the way you wanted him to. But I would say he kind of proved us wrong in New York. With the added spacing that he had, he was able to get to the rim extremely effectively and have one of his best offensive seasons in years. And I would say that was one of the driving forces of why the New York Knicks were one of the best offenses in the league. And now it's time to move on to the head focal of the offense, Jalen Brunson, who's coming off of a season averaging 26 points per game, 7 assists on a 61% true shooting. Jalen Brunson has been able to live at the free throw line, play in the mid-range, and even play in the post as an undersized guard. He's mega efficient from mid-range, and he's mega efficient from the outside and beyond the arc. Being able to get players on his hip, being able to get to the free throw line as constantly as he does, has led to him being one of the best clutch performers in the NBA. So when you have an offensive duo that good, you surround them with a really good collection of role players, whether it be OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, Deuce McBride, Josh Hart, or others. And all of that led to the New York Knicks going 51-31 and being the 3 seed in the Eastern Conference. And before the playoffs even started, a lot of analysts such as myself put the New York Knicks off as a team that could not go to the Eastern Conference Finals. But then they found themselves up 2-0 against the Boston Celtics. The New York Knicks were down 20 points in both games and found a way to come back with their offensive play from Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns, but their defense, which is something that we didn't think would happen from Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby. This was something that I didn't think would happen. A lot of people over NBA media did not think would happen. Nobody put on their bingo card that the New York Knicks would be up 2-0 on the Boston Celtics, because throughout the regular season, the New York Knicks could not get a win against the Boston Celtics. Every single time they saw each other, it was a pretty comfortable win for Boston, except outside of one game. And I hate to be that guy, but I still had confidence in the Boston Celtics. It was such a mismatch for the New York Knicks that a lot of people were still picking the Celtics to win in 6 games. Like, we all said, like, once the Celtics actually get their act together and start playing like the Boston Celtics again, we don't see the Celtics losing a game. And even in those games, the Boston Celtics had pretty comfortable control of the game. Through both games, there were points where they were up 20 points. And I think throughout halfway through the third and on through both games, Boston just relied on shot variance from 3, which is something that they were doing all season and the year before, and it just was not working. And even then, they weren't able to capitalize on the switches they were able to manufacture. Kristaps Porzingis was not playing well. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown just were not executing switches on Jalen Brunson to the level that they've been doing all season. And to be honest, I put that more of a loss on Boston than a win on New York. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of Knicks fans who completely disagree with me on that take, but I think the Boston Celtics lost both of those games more than the New York Knicks won. But I can't just really take that away from New York. They were still able to come back from down 20 in back-to-back games against the defending champions in their building. That's something that should not be glossed over. That's something that should be celebrated for New York, for a team that hasn't been to the Eastern Conference Finals in 25 years, to be able to go into TD Garden and stun the defending champions the way that they have in back-to-back games, being up 2-0, going back to Madison Square Garden, should be celebrated and it should be applauded. And we know the rest of the story. The Boston Celtics win Game 3. It's a close game in Game 4. Jason Tatum goes down with an injury. He's out for the rest of the season, and the Boston Celtics end up losing that series in 6. And with all the hype surrounded around the New York Knicks, we thought that this was the season that they could get to the NBA Finals. A lot of people were riding on the New York Knicks beating the Indiana Pacers, but that is also another really bad matchup. The Indiana Pacers are a team that thrive in pick and roll, thrive in transition, and thrive with a pace that the New York Knicks just could not match with Karl Anthony Towns at their center spot. And this brings up an issue that the New York Knicks have with this duo, that they will have this year, that they had last year, and that they're going to continue to have as long as this duo is in place. And that part is the defense. The Indiana Pacers were able to thrive in transition against the New York Knicks. They were able to thrive in the pick and roll. There were opportunities where the Pacers were just constantly getting Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns in the same action, and that is detrimental. So with the New York Knicks losing that series in 6 and the Indiana Pacers going to the NBA Finals, there was obviously some questions with this roster that had to be taken care of. And I think they fixed a lot of those issues. They got a brand new head coach in Mike Brown who loves to play with pace and loves to play with centers that can pass. And you also bring in a lot of depth. You go out and you go get Jordan Clarkson. You go get Gershon Yabusele. You bring in Malcolm Brogdon. There are multiple players that they brought into this roster that should help with their depth. And throughout the first 2 preseason games, I think it's very obvious that the New York Knicks are going to go into this season with a starting lineup of Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, Karl Anthony Towns, and Mitchell Robinson. Mitchell Robinson and Karl Anthony Towns used to share the floor a lot in that series, and they were able to crash the offensive glass. They were able to crash the defensive glass. And with this lineup, they could be one of the better rebounding teams in the entire NBA. Is Mitchell Robinson able to take away some of those defensive concerns while still keeping this offense as potent as it was last year? And obviously, the first question is, how is Karl Anthony Towns going to play next to another center? We know Karl Anthony Towns is only going to reach his ceiling as an offensive player at the center position, having the spacing to be able to attack the rim and stretch the floor and finish around the rim and not have too many post touches be double teamed because the level of shooters that are around him. Guys like Mikal Bridges, who can be a really good off-ball player and a really good relocator. OG Anunoby, who's gotten way better with his on-ball game and his catch and shoot ability. And with Jalen Brunson being a top 10 scorer in basketball. We all remember how Karl Anthony Towns' offense looked against another non-spacing center with his play in Minnesota. He wasn't bad, but we know that there's a reach or there's a ceiling that he can get to at the 5 spot. And I don't know if Mitchell Robinson really helps that. But they can do some very interesting things defensively with the rebounder and rim protector that Mitchell Robinson is. This is somebody that missed majority of the season last year, and this is somebody that they desperately needed. I mean, there's multiple lineups that you can go to that can help the New York Knicks defensively. There were lineups where if Karl Anthony Towns was on the floor without Jalen Brunson, you put Deuce McBride in there to help your point of attack defense, and you also keep Mitchell Robinson in to where they can pre-switch actions with OG or Mitchell Robinson to keep Karl Anthony Towns out of the play. You could run a lineup with Jalen Brunson and Mitchell Robinson manning that center position, and you can put guys like Mikal, OG, and Josh Hart next to them so that can still be a good defensive unit. But it just really concerns me, how will the offense really get to a level that it reached last year? Yes, you still have Jalen Brunson, and yes, you still have Karl Anthony Towns, but I even saw in the preseason that there are some looks that they would usually get around the rim that were taken away because Mitchell Robinson is manning up that spot. Now, obviously, that could be a dribble drive, collapse, and lob situation, or where Mitchell Robinson can run the floor and finish plays to the level that he does. But I do think that some of the value of being able to have those driving lanes for guys like Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns are now taken away because Mitchell Robinson is going to be from that 0 to 5 feet area. And this really does confuse me because I don't think this is the type of offense that Mike Brown would usually run. I mean, this is somebody that has thrived with pace in Sacramento. This is a guy that thrived with spacing and being able to play through your center, and I just don't know how they're going to be able to do that. Yes, I do think there's lineups that Karl Anthony Towns could be the 5-man, and you could put a bunch of spacers around him, whether that's Jordan Clarkson, whether that's OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, even Malcolm Brogdon or Landry Shamet, the way they were shooting the ball. But I do think this takes away from their pace and their offensive ceiling, but I also do think this helps with their rebounding and their defense. Do I think they're going to be a much better defense? No, but I do think that can help them throughout the regular season. With that being said, some really bad matchups I see for the New York Knicks in the postseason would be the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Atlanta Hawks, and the Milwaukee Bucks. As for the Cleveland Cavaliers, this is a team that can stretch you out and really play pick and roll to a T and put Karl Anthony Towns in the action as much as possible. And I understand the Cleveland Cavaliers run that double big lineup with Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, but there's a agility, mobility, and athleticism gap between those two centers. And with having two guards that can play in the pick and roll and make reads consistently, and two bigs that can play in pick and roll and be a defensive anchor, they're always going to have a pick and roll tandem on the floor. Is that something that the New York Knicks really want to see through a 7-game series? And for the things that I said about the Indiana Pacers, I feel as though a lot of that can be said about the Atlanta Hawks. This is going to be a team that runs. They are going to run with athletes like Dyson Daniels, Zachary Reese-Shea, Jalen Johnson, even Nickeil Alexander-Walker off the bench. Even if they can stay healthy, I think the Atlanta Hawks would have a really good opportunity to beat the New York Knicks, especially with a guard like Trae Young who could play in the pick and roll and make the right reads. He's one of the best passers and lob passers in the NBA, and if you have that level of athleticism and pace that you can play with that Atlanta Hawks style of offense, I see them beating the Knicks. And the last one for me is the Bucks. And I don't necessarily see the Bucks beating the Knicks because their defense is going to be so bad, but I do see a world where their offense could keep this team in the series. With Giannis Antetokounmpo and Miles Turner, I don't know how much Kyle Kuzma is going to be in the rotation by the time of playoffs. Now, I do see him playing a lot in the regular season, but by the time the playoffs come around, I don't really see Kyle Kuzma starting. If Doc Rivers could just make the adjustment and just put 4 other spacers around Giannis Antetokounmpo, it's going to be so hard for the Knicks to stop that offense. Now, some matchups I could see for the Knicks that could be like easy ones or really good matchups for them are the Magic, Heat, Raptors, and Pistons. Some teams who just don't have that level of offensive talent. Now, I understand the Magic have that with Paolo and Franz, but the spacing around them, I understand they added Desmond Bane. Tristan Da Silva and Jace Richardson are still maybes to me because they're very young players, but they still do have some floor spacing concerns, even though they added Desmond Bane, to where I could see the New York Knicks being able to hide Karl Anthony Towns better than they can against the teams above me. But with all that being said, I still don't see a world where the New York Knicks win a title with Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns being their 2 best players. I just think there are a lot of high-powered offenses the Knicks would have to beat to see themselves going to an NBA Finals or to win an NBA Finals alone with that detrimental of a defensive liability in Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns. That is your point guard and your center. We all know how tough it can be to have a bad center defensively and then make it even worse with one of the worst point guard defenders in the league. This New York team is going to be very talented offensively, but do I see a championship? Not really. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you guys like this type of content, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Make sure you guys check out my Twitter at ATBSports1. Make sure you guys check out my TikTok at TheBuzzerENT. Make sure you guys check out my Instagram at TheBuzzerSports_. And make sure you guys join my playback where we are going to be watching basketball all throughout the regular season and postseason. And with all that being said, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.